how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward.
To infinity and beyond!
Some people without brains do an awful lot of talking, don't they?
It's classified.
You talking to me?
I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you.
I can't lie!
Expecto Patronum!
Entertainment X.
You never know what you're going to get.
For this episode, I sit down and chat with Gregory Fletcher. Gregory wears many hats in the entertainment industry. I met him when he was wearing his production stage management hat. Gregory is also a playwright and much more. And we get to take each hat off and examine what's under it, including his views on the industry and relationships and professionalism. It's really a wonderful, wonderful conversation. So I hope you enjoy. We're back. I'm Clayton Howe, and today with me is Gregory Fletcher. Gregory, hi.
How are you?
I'm great.
Happy to be here.
Yes, and thank you for taking this valuable time between shows when you could be resting to chat with me. We just finished up a 2.5-hour production of Aida. We're here in the back of the box offices and chatting. It's fun. I'm excited to talk to you about it. Now, for those listening, I'm meeting Gregory in his production stage management position, although you do many other things, as we all do in entertainment. How did you begin? What was the journey here into theater? Was it theater first?
It was always theater first. I was born and raised in Dallas, Texas, but my parents were New Yorkers. So they brought an avid theater-going habit to Dallas, Texas. And so as young children, they brought all of us kids to the theater. And so I was starting to see theater early on. And I started getting involved in elementary school in the children's theater program at the Dallas Theater Center, where we could get in for free to main stage productions. And so my parents had season tickets. And so I was seeing, 6 to 8 professional productions at the Dallas Theater Center a year, plus the Dallas Summer Musicals during the summer. So the amount of theater that I was able to soak up and be influenced by was huge. It was really huge.
Watching these shows, were you like, oh, I can make a living doing this, I'm going to do this? Or was it not until later that you decided?
I knew that I didn't know what I was going to do. I mean, at the beginning, they would audition any children's roles in the main stage productions. They would audition in their children's theater. So I was in a production of Peter Pan. I was Whitney Benjamin Day in a production of Life with Father, and stuff like that. I was Barney McKean and Member of the Wedding, and theaters like that. I did some children's roles, and I really enjoyed acting. But really, I think what turned me is when I met my great aunt and uncle when I was 10 years old. They were writers. They were Matt and Matilde and Theodore Ferro.
What names?
Ferro. And they wrote a radio show called Lorenzo Jones and His Wife Belle that lasted for about 14 years during the Depression. They went into live television at that point. Omnibus Theater Presents, Kraft Theater Presents, Somerset Mom Presents. And they did that thing in New York. And then they went to LA and did tape television when television went to tape. And during all that time, they wrote novels and short stories and articles and plays. And I met them when I was 10 years old, and I absolutely just fell in love with them. And I wanted to start writing plays, and I started going through their drawers when I would visit, and I would find a script for Leave It to Beaver, and I would pull this out and say, I have to have this, and I would go home. And the funny thing is one of the script of Leave It to Beaver that I brought home to Dallas from LA, I cherished it like a treasure, but it didn't have the last page. And I didn't even notice that because it was just a mimeograph or whatever that is called, those copies. And so I wrote the last page of the script and sent it back to them and said, this is how I think it ends. And they just said, oh, okay, we know what to do with you now. And I was a 10-year-old, and they talked to me like I was a writer. And I would read their adult scripts that they would send me, and I would respond to them, and I would visit them during Christmas breaks. And I just started imitating them and writing plays.
Whoa. I didn't know that. I love this. Okay. What were some of the standout things that you learned from them about writing? Were there formats, ways of being, thoughts that you should have when creating different stories? I know these are like broad questions because like, what are we writing? A sitcom? Are we writing a feature film? Are we writing? But I'm curious, does anything stand out, like lessons that they were teaching you in regards to it?
Well, I mean, in the very beginning, I guess I certainly learned how does it look on a page. So as a young kid in elementary school, I knew the proper formatting for a play, and I knew all of that because I had their structure in front of me. But I also guess I picked up on their sense of comedy because their writing was very funny and it was a little bit like when George Burns would say goodnight, Gracie, and she would say goodnight, Gracie. That was the kind of dingy was some of their humor, but it wasn't joke oriented as much as it was character oriented and action oriented, and so I think that played a big influence on me. But when I had a play done, I showed a script of mine to my high school drama teacher, and she gave me a book on playwriting, and she said, read this book over the summer and rewrite your play, and then we'll do it in the fall. And so, of course, this was huge for me, and going into my senior year of high school, and my great aunt and uncle flew in from LA for my opening. I mean, this is the kind of people they were.
What?
So, yeah. So, I mean, I was just really influenced by them and just felt like I was a writer, and, They kept saying to me, often they would say to me, write what you know. And I kept saying, I don't know anything. I'm too young, So they just kept really pushing me to what matters and go deep and that kind of stuff.
Was the first play you wrote in high school?
Elementary school, yeah.
First full play was elementary school.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. But I wrote a play called Life of a Jewish Papa. And it was really a combination of Life with Father and Fiddler on the Roof and Sound of Music all mixed together. And these were some of the shows I had seen. And so a lot of it I was just copying.
Write what you know.
Yeah, well, there was. Yeah. So, I wrote some, sketches that we did in junior high school. And I guess a play or so in high school that got the 3-sided coin is what I remember. And then I still wrote plays. If I didn't get cast in something in college when I was a theater major at Cal State Northridge, I would write something. And then I would show it to a faculty member, and she's like, oh, let's do this as an independent study. And so, I wrote plays in college and all of that stuff. And I thought that's what I was going to do. But then I also started getting interested in directing, and I was directing in undergrad and did a production of Runaways and then got into an MFA program at Columbia. And so I kind of let the writing, float away a little bit as I focused on directing. And then when I graduated Columbia, I was 26. I looked 16 years old. It was really hard to get anyone to trust me to be directing a production. So I did a lot of ADing, and I was working with Adrian Hall a few times. And then finally I called him and I said, hey, can I do something in the basement? And he's like, darling, I can't talk to you right now. I just lost a stage manager. And then he paused. And then I thought to myself, he's going to ask me to stage manage. And he says, do you know how to stage manage? And I said, yeah. And I had stage managed a production when I was in undergrad, the West Coast premiere of Wedding Band by Alice Childress. And it was like an equity waiver production out there that I did right out of undergrad. And he asked me, and I said, yes. And he goes, can you be in Dallas in 4 days? And I said, yeah. And I said, I'm not in equity. And he's like, we'll take care of that. And so that's how I got my equity card, and that's how I started working professionally. And I ended up stage managing for him, I guess, 2 more times after that.
Wow. I want to go back to the writing one more second, and then I want to talk about the stage managing. Writing. Do you come up against procrastination? Or you ever find yourself procrastinating when you're writing? Or is it always flowing?
I starve myself as a writer because I'm not independently wealthy, or I'm not on a trust fund. Okay. So I have a lot of survivor jobs that pay my bills. Okay. So therefore, I don't have a lot of time to write.
I see.
So therefore, when I write, and I can literally write on a subway. I can edit on a bus. I often carry stuff with me. So if I have to wait for someone for 30 minutes, I can just sit in all the white noise that's happening around me in New York City and just write.
And that's when you do it.
Yeah. So I starve myself so I can always write.
That's really smart.
And I have different projects that I'm working on that are at various places. Yeah. So it's easier to just pick up something, And also as a writer, it's so important to read. So I always have my Kindle, and I'm always reading new plays and responding to plays and reading established plays and now novels and stuff like that.
Wow. Are you on? So do you use like Final Draft, or you do like you write it out by hand and then type it later, or do you
Well, no, I think I used to do it by hand and then I would type it out. But now I think with laptops and everything, it's just so much easier to start with the laptop. So I don't. I use a Word program and I created a style sheet so that I have the character, where it's I don't tab and it goes right to dialogue and it goes right to the right fonts and all that stuff.
And
so
you made that?
Yeah, out of Word, because you know how you can create a style sheet. I've tried Final Draft before, but I just found creating my own. The hard thing is that there's not really one established way it's supposed to look on the page. There's a West Coast version, there's an East Coast version, and now the Dramatists Guild is trying to get everybody to conform. But it's really hard to get everybody to do the same formatting for plays. TV plays, screenplays, and teleplays, they tend to look more similar. But a lot of times plays, they don't really have there's not one format. So I sort of created the one I like based on what I learned from my great aunt and uncle. And so I tend to use that.
For any other playwrights out there, are you willing to discuss a little bit what that format is? Like, what does that look like for you? What is the
on the
hybrid?
page?
Yeah.
Well,
I know it's hard to talk it out instead of seeing it, but
can I plug my book, Shorts and Briefs?
Yeah.
I have a book called Shorts and Briefs that I actually used when I was teaching playwriting. And I've also, I took 10 years off and taught at the university level.
Yeah.
And I was teaching playwriting. I was teaching play analysis. I was teaching intro to theater. And so when I would get into playwriting, I created this book called Shorts and Briefs because I thought the best way to teach people how to write plays was to write a 10-minute play, because a 10-minute play has the same elements that a full-length play has. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and then sort of that 3-act story structure. And so I started doing that, and then I started writing 10-minute plays and having a lot of success with them off Broadway and in different contests around the country. Yeah. And so I have this book called Shorts and Briefs that the first half is a collection of short plays, 9 of them, and the second half of the book are the principles that I think about when I write plays, which also can be applied to a lot of creative writing. So it's a very short and concise book, really easy to pick up on, and this book will share everything I believe in playwriting. But the difference between a screenplay and a teleplay, for example, is in a play, the dialogue is the main thing. So the dialogue has the widest column. Whereas in screenplays and teleplays, the dialogue is the thinnest column, and the action and what's going on physically is the widest column. And in plays, that's much thinner. So that's kind of the big difference between the two.
I've noticed that before too, because if you think about it, like you're saying, a stage play has a ton of dialogue. It's all about the words. It's about what they're talking about. But in a film, it's all about what you see, the action, the movement, the camera shots, the lighting. Much more than on a stage. Interesting. Okay, so stage managing. How have you gotten better at organization? Have you always been good at organization, or has stage managing helped you with?
Well, stage management definitely helped me organize, but I will say I'm a really lucky person in that I can definitely work from both sides of my brain. Yeah. So, maybe when I'm a writer or when I'm directing, you're working more from a creative side. And then when you're stage managing, you're working more from the other side that's about organizing and service and, anticipating problems and putting out fires and that, and there's a lot of directors or a lot of people in theater who only work from the creative side. It was like when I was often working and assisting Adrian Hall, he couldn't, do his laundry. He couldn't drive. There were so many things he couldn't do because he was just so creative and needed to be creative all the time that he often just needed people around him to do the basic things. And so, I started learning how to do that, and it also became one of my greatest survivor jobs, so that when I wasn't stage managing and I wasn't working and earning money, I could go and be a personal assistant. And so once I was stage managing Ann Mira's play, Afterplay, Off Broadway, and she's the mom of Ben Stiller. Yeah. And so we were having an opening up party in her apartment, and she was showing me the apartment and stuff. And I would look and just say, oh, why do you have videos in all, so many different rooms? Why don't you make a video collection of everything together? And she's like, oh, would you like to organize that? And I was like, sure. And it just I just started doing organization projects, You want to clean out this closet? You want to organize this file cabinet? You want to do this? You want to do that? And I would just call them and say, hey, my show's closing, and do you guys have any projects for me? Yeah, come on over. And it was it was my favorite Survivor job ever, because, Jerry Stiller and Ann Mira, I mean, they're just so funny and so legendary. They live on the Upper West Side, which is close to me. They would pay for your lunch. They were very, very generous people.
Yeah.
So it was just such a pleasure. So many people in the theater, quite often actors were waiters and writers and directors were word processor or temp agents. So for me to be able to go and say, I'm going to be working for Stiller and Mira, it was just like, okay, that's a great job. And it was a great, they were very generous. It was a great paycheck and it was great. And, over 10 years of off and on working for them, they really became like family to me. And even when I stopped working for them, I still keep in touch and go to birthday parties. And, I was there visiting Anne the last day of her life, before she passed away. And so they're just very close. I love them a lot. I have everything nice in my apartment is from Stiller and Mira. Someone will say, "Oh, that's nice. Where'd you get that?" I'm like, "Oh, Stiller and Mira."
For real?
Yeah.
That's funny. I think I might have missed it. How did you link up with them? What was the connection?
I was
with
stage
that?
managing her play after play.
Oh, you were stage managing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we had an opening
And
night
you had
party.
the party.
And
just at the party you
I
became
just said,
friends.
"Hey, why don't you put all these videos together?" And I just started organizing projects. And they already had a personal assistant or two, but I would just sort of add to the mix and do projects and and mundane stuff too, like so and so I need birthday gifts for these people. Can you go buy stuff? Can you wrap them? Can you deliver them? Stuff like that.
How are you on? And I'm just so curious because now we're talking about like assisting and stuff on scheduling. Do you have like a format with your calendar, the way you organize your appointments?
No, I used to use the book so that you could see it in hard copy. And that was really important because there's no way you can, memorize all of that stuff. You have to have it down. And a lot of times when you can see it, it's easier to organize and plan and see what's going on. But, now because of the times and because of the iPhones, and the calendar program that, it's on your laptop and it updates to your phone and it's all so easy. So now I use all of that stuff because I can have a color for production and I can have a color for personal. And if I'm working on an upcoming production, that can be a different color too. And so it's easy to organize that in that way.
Do you organize your email?
I do. I have a folder for each production I'm working on.
Yeah.
And I'll have one that's just for a playwriting or one that's just for whatever project I'm working on, or one that's for receipts, or one that's for instructions. So I do. I don't tend to keep everything. When a show closes, after a while, I'd get rid of all those emails and
all the rehearsals and everything.
Yeah.
I just started organizing mine, and that's why I'm asking, because it's like I ended up making like 10 or 12 mailboxes, and I'm like, oh my god,
yeah, that's
I
a
need
lot
more. Stage managing. How have you gotten better at communicating with other humans? Because there's a lot of communication there. You're talking to the music director, audio, lights, actors.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about stage management is, in my day when I was in school, I didn't really study it. I really learned it from doing it. And so a lot of times when a fire happens, to anticipate that fire the next time. And so that's how I think a lot of stage managers grow, is just by experiencing. Often, too, you're assisting, because every stage manager usually has an assistant or two. And so a lot of times you're assisting and learning from stage management who has had a lot of great work. And so for me, I kept kind of going back and forth, which I felt was really great. One time I would be an assistant and I would learn a whole lot. And then the next job I would be the PSM on some Off-Broadway show. And I would apply those things. And then, and then the next job I would get would be an assistant, and I would learn more. And it's that kind of thing. The people skills you just learn it. It's a lot by listening, and it's a lot by anticipating. But you're also ultimately serving the production and doing what's best for the play, either in the rehearsal room or in the theater. So you're constantly, putting your ego aside and thinking, okay, what do I need to do to best serve this moment for the play?
Yeah.
So it's good. Sometimes I feel like in a past life I might have been a butler or something.
It's the bald head.
Yeah. So I don't know.
Norma Desmond's
there's
husband
something
in
about
Sunset Boulevard.
It's easy for me to sort of step in often and see where people need help, and maybe that's because of stage management. I don't know. I just, let me help this, right? Just let me step in. Let me help you make this work.
So without making this is not at all gossipy or anything, I'm curious though, is there a moment or a story that you have, changing names or whatever, of learning on communication, or like something that happened in a show that was like a big learning moment for you, or something that stands out in your mind?
Well,
It's all learning.
yeah, it's all learning, and every job, and with stage management, it's never boring because every job is serving a very specific play or musical.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, what you need to serve is different from the last one or the next one, and so I mean, I think I've learned by working with different. I've been lucky because I've worked in New York. I've worked in the off-Broadway scene mostly.
Yeah.
Some regional theater, but mostly the off-Broadway scene. And so I guess I've learned by different people I've worked with. There's been mostly it's ego. Because you see people with certain egos and how they talk to people or how they treat people, how they respond to a situation, and you either witness that and say, "I want to be like that," or "Yeah, I'm not going to be like that." And so I've worked with some awful people, and people who have big names, and then you're like, "Really?" And it's disappointing because you kind of came in excited and then all of a sudden they fall off the pedestal, and you're like, I'm not going to be like you.
Like Ace Young.
Ace Young, oh my God, he's amazing.
I had him on a few weeks ago, and he's just like, I finally got him to break down all of his like ways of being, because he's it's ego, and he's such a nice guy.
Oh, he's more than just nice though. He's dependable. He's responsible. He does what he says he's going to do. And these are all qualities that stage managers immediately look to see, can I trust you? If you say you're going to do this, are you going to do it?
Yeah.
I mean, he came in off book, word perfect. You give him a note, it's done. He takes it. He's amazing. I would work with him any day.
Pro. I mean,
Yeah.
he's a pro. I learned a lot
Yeah.
from that process.
And there's a lot of actors you don't want to work with, or because because they're late, or because they're not off book, or because you give them a note and they don't take it, and you have to give them the note again, and it takes 2 or 3 times. And and you learn really quickly who you want to work with for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So for people who can't figure it out and be like Ace, then it's hard, because if you work with an actor like Ace, you definitely want to work with him again. Whereas you work with other actors and they don't understand, you're being a little bit of a diva, or you're being difficult, or you're being irresponsible, or you're, I don't want to work with you again.
Right.
And I will tell you, I have been at an audition table with a director, and an actor has come in, and the actor has walked out, and I turned to the director and said, "She's really, really needy." And he takes and it gets moved into the no pile.
Yeah.
And I felt bad, but at the same time, it was like, as a stage manager, I can't work with that actress.
But it's almost like, and I understand feeling bad, but like, what happens if they found out you knew that and you allowed them? It's like you're sabotaging a production almost. You know what I mean? Like, it's like the opposite is like, you're trying to look out for the welfare. I mean, it's not like you're trying to for the well-being. You're not trying to actually.
I tell my when I worked
things.
for when I taught for 10 or 11 years, I would tell my students, you have to be in a rehearsal room sometimes with little to no sunlight, little to no fresh air, 6 days a week, 8 hours a day. And if people don't want to be around you because of some weird habit, or because of some weird smell, or because you don't take care of yourself, or because you're so needy and causing issues or delays, who's going to want to work with you in the future? There are so many people who get it. There are so many people who
And
can
everyone's
do
good.
It. Yeah.
It's not.
Oh
we're
my
not even
God.
talking about talent. I mean,
That's right.
Everyone's good.
Right.
At a certain level. It's the stuff that's backstage.
Yeah. Even in New York, like if I go to the theater with a friend and they announce an understudy and they're like, "Oh," I'm like, "It's New York, okay? It's going to be great." Understudies are great.
They're on it.
There's so much talent here.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
Yeah.
So you've semi-recently released a YA novel.
Yeah. Other People's Crazy.
Yeah.
My first YA novel.
How long did that take to start to finish?
There was a period when I was an adjunct and a sabbatical replacement, rather. I was a sabbatical replacement for 1 semester at Wilkes University in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. And I was working in the theater program and teaching 2 classes and directing a musical. And I met the woman who ran the creative writing program. Bonnie Culver, and she found out I wrote plays, and I found out she wrote plays, and we exchanged plays, and we gave each other responses and notes. And from that, she invited me to their low residency creative writing program, where you can earn an MA and an MFA, but you're not actually on campus all the time. You only go to campus twice a year for 1 week, and everything else is done online with a mentor. And so she invited me to come and be a part of the playwriting faculty, and I've been there, I guess, since 2007. It's been a really long time. And anyway, all I ever did is playwriting. I never wrote in any other genre whatsoever. Yeah. But over the years, I've been surrounded by amazing writers in fiction, Beverly D'Onofrio and Kaylee Jones, and just lots and lots of people. And sometimes at lunch, I would tell Beverly the story about my grandmother, and she'd be like, "You got to write that down." And then I'd see her 6 months later, and she said, "Did you ever write that down?" And they just started encouraging me, and I'm like, I don't know if I know how to write like that. I've only ever done playwriting. So I started writing a little bit of essays and, creative nonfiction, and I got 4 of them published. And then I started writing short stories, and I got 1 published, and I have my second one being published in October. And then I started just writing other and bigger things. And
I love it. We're going to keep going. We're going to keep going here. But I'm so curious. What is, you just say like published, like you can just call up the pizzeria and like you just write your publisher and you're good to go. You get your pizza, you're good to go. What was the process? I mean, what is the process with publishing? Was that a friend of a friend?
No. There's a lot of websites that you can, there's a lot of lists of publishers, and there's a lot of contests. There's a lot of list serves that you can get on.
Yeah.
And you find out, this journal is looking for this kind of material, and this blog is looking for this, and this anthology is looking for this, and you just start submitting your stuff, just like a playwright submits the plays, especially 10-minute plays. You're sending them to all these different contests. There's a huge demand for that in regards to essays and short stories too. Yeah. And so being at Wilkes, I was being around all these other writers in different genres, so I just started trying my hand at it and loving it. And it was also a very different thing for me to do from playwriting, so I just kept going and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's how I got my first YA novel, which just came out this month, actually.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. And it's on Amazon, and it's Kindle and hardback and all of that stuff. And I'm starting, I'm just starting to get reviews on Amazon, so it's really exciting. And friends and family are, reading and getting through it, and I'm getting those emails. And so it's a very exciting time. Other people's crazy. It's it's been a joy to write it, and I'm actually already writing my second one, so I love it.
Oh, yeah, that was my next question. Have the floodgates opened with YA novels now, or novels in general?
Maybe, because it's been very, very rewarding. In life, when you find something where time passes easily, then I really think that this is a good sign that you're doing something you're supposed to be doing. And so for me, when I'm writing, I lose sense of time. And so it always reminds me of, and it gives you something to focus on. It gives you something to do, and it feels very enriching and rewarding. And then, this one is a little bit about, it teaches a great lesson for everyone to learn. And it's not just YA. I think most of the readers I've been talking to have been adults in my age. And it's just a great reminder, because it talks a lot about karma, and it talks a lot about being positive and what kind of choices do we make. And so, it's the biggest kid in his 10th grade class, and he's being bullied by the smallest kid in his class. And it's how does he respond to that, and how does he change his life from chaos into something that's more enjoyable? And his single parent mom helps him by introducing him to karma, and he just learns all this really great stuff through the book. And by the end of the book, he's in a better place.
It says at the very end, "Karma's a bitch." The end. I'm teasing. That's a great story. Where does that come from? Is that just like you sit one day and you're like,
almost every play and almost every story I've ever written, you could never say, how do you come up with it? Because they all come from a different place. Yeah. And this YA novel came from a very short conversation with a friend, and she had to run off, and she was going to her son's school. And I just said to her, I hope everything's okay. And she said, yeah, my son's being bullied, and it's weird because he's the biggest kid in his class, and he's being bullied by the smallest. And then she went off. And I just kept thinking about that. I'd never met the son. I didn't know anything about their lives or about anything else. And I just started filling in how this could happen and where does it go from here. And that's how I started writing Other People's Crazy.
As you're writing Other People's Crazy, do you have or did you have character development issues? If so, do you have experiments or little things that you do to help develop characters?
Definitely. And not to plug my other book, Shorts and Briefs, again, but in Shorts and Briefs, I write about all the different principles I think about when I'm writing plays, and almost all of those principles also apply to when I'm writing creative writing, because I journal a lot and I write a lot about the character, and I almost try to write about the character from birth until whatever age they are. Yeah. So that's a lot of work to fill in. Yeah. Because if you don't, all your characters are going to sound very much alike. They're going to talk alike. They're going to, it's really much, a lot of times it's the writer's voice. And, the trick is really to get into the character's voice, not the writer's voice, so that they have different vocabularies and they have different ways of speaking. And so this is really important. So I do journal a lot, and I do a lot of character work beforehand. And really, writing is sort of the last thing I do. I think a lot about a beginning and a middle and an end. I think about the structure. I think about the climax. I think about the dramatic question that's asked in the very beginning of the story and goes all the way through the story and is answered around the climax of the story. So there's a lot of things that I think about to have a very strong structure and foundation so that when you're building that house, it's not going to blow over and be done with. Yeah. And if it has a strong structure and a strong foundation, then it's really going to withstand a lot of wind.
Yeah. But how, and what, so I'm curious, along with the principles you have in the Shorts and Briefs book, what are structural questions that you ask, or are there some of the principles that you're willing to share or discuss a little further on with that? Yeah.
I mean, well, it's all about development, right? Because if you just start writing something, two guys on a park bench, right? It's like, well, how does it change? How does it develop? So I'm constantly thinking about how does it move forward? Because if it stays the same, you're going to get people sitting back in their chair. Whereas if it's about development and about moving forward, you're all of a sudden going to get people leaning forward. And so I want people leaning forward. And so therefore I need development and I need change. Yeah. And so a lot of times I'll say, oh, I really like this story and this is what I'm working on, but it'll be very clear to me I don't have enough yet. It's not baked enough. I need more ingredients, so I think about, where does it go? And sometimes I have to say, oh, well, I need to start the story earlier. And maybe that's where I get more material from. Yeah. But it definitely needs a journey and a definite turning points and this beginning, middle, and end, like in Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. Even in a short story, it needs, 3 acts in a way. Like 10-minute plays have the same 3-act story structure that a full-length play has. It's not just a scene. So often people think when they're writing a 10-minute play or a short story, they're just writing a scene. And they're not. You're really writing something that's much bigger. Yeah, even if it's 10 pages.
Told in less words.
Right, yeah. Because it has development, it has turning points. Yeah. It moves.
Yeah. I say yeah like 3 times because I'm like, oh, it's clicking with me. Because then I'm thinking of like movies I've seen or TV shows, or like SVU does a great job. Law and Order SVU. You know what the format is. You know what the show is. It's going to be some sort of sexual assault, murder, or something in that, like a sex crime. But yet they always manage to switch it up. The 2 people on the bench, well, that one person is actually an undercover agent. We didn't know that. And they're acting like a homeless person, and you have development. You have a story. You have something that's interesting.
Right. And also the other important thing is the dramatic question, because, hopefully it's not heavy-handed, but sometime near the beginning of the story, something's going to happen, this sort of point of attack, where something's going to happen and all of a sudden you're going to know, okay, this is the question that's going to be answered. And then by the end, when it's answered, the audience gets the sense of, oh, it's over. I know it's over. And that's why sometimes when we're in a movie or at a play or something and it ends and you're like, wait, what? It's over? What do you mean it's over? It's because they didn't really focus in on answering that dramatic question, or the dramatic question wasn't clear enough and it was just so vague that nobody really even knew what this was about.
I've seen that. I've felt that before. And it's like the other one is like, or they want you to just keep asking that dramatic question in your life. Like, we're not going to give you the answer. You go out into the world and figure it out. What is it? What are you going to do about this? And that's like, oh.
Yeah. That's either brave or lazy.
It's brilliant or terrible. The journaling you do about the characters, are you writing as the character? Is that like just journaling, just, to get more words and feelings out about who the character is?
I mean, maybe toward the end, but in the beginning, I'm answering so many questions that, what makes us us? Our parents' bank account and income, what they do, what their religion is, what their politics are. Yeah. Then what are mine? What's my education? Do I have any issues that challenge me mentally, physically, and within the community? And I'm trying to answer all of that stuff so that I know this full person, not just a person in one scene or not just a person who's going to appear briefly. I know them fully so that then when they really come on, they come on with a presence. And then I immediately know if something is right or wrong for that character, because that's when people say a lot of times writers are the god of their world. In a way, if you spend that kind of time prepping, then you do become sort of the god, and when something's right and when something's not right. Yeah, because a lot of times, there's all these talkbacks now for new plays. And if you don't know your play, you could, an audience member could come and rewrite your play in a talkback. And if you're not solid on what you want to write and what's the story you want to tell and what you want the audience to walk away with, some stranger could come in and just rewrite your play and you could grab onto it and go, yeah. And so you got to know. You got to know. And so you only know by journaling and writing and figuring it out.
I do. No, you're right. The talkbacks are interesting. I've learned a lot from them.
And they can be very helpful. And they can show you things that you didn't even think of.
Yeah.
And sometimes, all the answers aren't there in the first draft, and it's still about discovery, and you're still discovering it in the second draft and the third draft and all of that stuff. So, and that's okay too, because it's a process. And for me, I tend to overwrite in the beginning. And a lot of my revisions after that are all about editing out, or just refining speech or picking stronger words. But, I can edit, and it's like, will this ever be done? Okay, I'm just going to read through it just for fun. I'm just going to read through it. And then all of a sudden you're like taking it apart and rewriting it. And I'm just like, oh no, really?
How do you know when you're done?
Well, you don't. I mean, I think for me, I know I'm done when it gets published. Because when it gets published, I can't change it anymore because it's been published. And so I just have to say, you know what, this story is where it is after working on it for this long, and now it's getting published. This is where it is. Would I change it? Listen, I bought the Kindle version of Other People's Crazy, and I was reading it just for fun to read it, and I found at least 25 things that I would change. Wow. And here it's been published. And I don't mean big things, but I mean words, or that's a word, or oh my God, there's a typo, or or that's a totally wrong word, or that word is misspelled. But 25 things I made markings on my Kindle. And so it's just like, it's very frustrating because, and Tennessee Williams is really known for that too. He would have plays published, and then he would still rework them. How there were 3 different versions of Cat on a Hot Tin Roof and stuff like that. So, I mean, I guess as a writer, maybe that's just part of the process, is we're always writing. So.
Yeah. Well, when you're creating the world, when do you stop?
Yeah. And at some point when it's published, I think that's a good time to just let it go and now start something new. Because we're all going to grow as writers. And so if people read Other People's Crazy and they're like, this, and this, maybe my next one is going to be more mature or further along, or who knows. We're learning as we're doing.
Yeah.
And discovering.
How are you in life? How are you staying like on track and focused? Or when you lose focus, how do you get back on track?
Wow. For me, it's about money, because sometimes your heart picks things that you really want to do, be it writing or theater, but the paycheck isn't great. So you say, okay, but I have a certain amount of savings, so I can do this for this long.
Yeah.
But then at other times, you have to pick jobs where you can make more money, even though the work might not be the project you want to work on, but it's a money job, So, I mean, you just have to, listen, I was grocery shopping for Stiller and Mirror, with an MFA from Columbia and an MA in playwriting from Boston University. And I would, sometimes go home and cry into a journal and say, I'm too educated for this.
Yeah.
But at the same time, how lucky I was to, they were paying me $25 an hour to run errands for them. And it meant I didn't have to go put on a coat and tie and sit in a corporate office and answer phones way downtown. So, I mean, you just have to see the positive side of things, you know? And we all have to do things we don't want to do, and we all have to make a living. And so for me, those are the big choices of when am I going to do something I really believe in, and when am I going to do something for the money. And for me, I taught for 11 and a half years, and I was making great money, and I had a savings, and I had great benefits, and I was off 2.5 months a year, twice a year, 2.5 months, twice a year, summer and winter. And I just said, you know what? I need to go back to theater. I need to go back to doing it instead of teaching it. And so I'm back and working freelance, and boy, my checking account just got as low as it's ever been, But now all of a sudden, I'm really happy. Yeah. And people, even strangers in my building, have stopped me and said, "What's going on? Your aura's different, or your spirit's different, and
your clothes have holes in them." No.
But now my next job, is going to be more of a money job, and it's also going to be more of an adventure, something I've never done before. So, when you work freelance, I think that variety of work helps shape what you do and what you pick.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I like variety. I like a variety of jobs. I like theater because, eventually it's going to close and you're going to do another show, or you're going to be in a different type of theater. You're going to be with different people.
Yeah. Was that difficult transitioning from 11 years of teaching to going back to freelancing?
What was difficult was giving up that paycheck. And what was difficult was giving up that free time, because I did so much writing when I was teaching over the last,
because you're done at a certain time every day.
Yeah. And so and you had big breaks where you weren't required to be on campus. So I got a lot of writing done. So now I have to be a little more protective about not giving away all my time to stage management, because I still want to teach. I still want to write. Yeah. And maybe someday I'll go back to teaching, depending, because I like variety. I certainly love students. I have a lot of great relationships in my life, a lot of adopted students who are former students who are now in their late 20s and early 30s. And my extended family keeps growing, and I love that. Yeah. But I also love working in the theater. I love walking in a backstage door. I love being part of the backstage scene. I love managing a rehearsal process. I love calling the cues for a performance, and being the one that says half hour, 15, 5 minutes, places, and all that.
Places, please? Is your places called?
It's really fun. I love all that stuff. Yeah. So, I'm just a theater junkie. And when I had the money and when I was teaching, I subscribed. I had season tickets to Playwrights and Signature and New York Theater Workshop and the Metropolitan Opera. And, I was a theater junkie. I just could not see enough theater. So now, back in stage management, I don't get to see as much theater as I used to, because now I'm working in the evenings and I have that theater schedule. So I'm not seeing as much theater.
Back to the relationships with the students and whatnot. Back to your personal relationship with the students. No, it's not what it sounded like. That's not what I'm asking.
Thank you.
Professionally, the relationships, what are your views on them? How do you view professional relationships?
Well, relationships are your future, because as a stage manager, you're probably going to get hired. Hopefully, you're going to get hired again by the director who you just worked with, or the producer is really going to like you and they're going to want you back for their next production. So you can never burn a bridge. You always have to be given 200%. You always have to be serving the project. You always have to be pleasant and want people to work around you, because otherwise, how are you going to get future work? You're not going to work with new people every single project. So for me, that's one of the joys about being back as a freelance, because, meeting, people like Luis, who directed Aida. He's a very exciting director, and he's definitely someone I would want to work with again. So, what do I have to do as a stage manager to make myself, interesting to him, so that he wants me in the room with his next project or something like that. So those kind of professional relationships are very important because it's going to be your life. And, the moment you work with, directors who are full of egos, or people who are in the room who are so full of negativity or nastiness, it's like, I don't want to be here. We're so lucky to be doing theater. It should be a joyful experience. And if it's not a joyful experience in the rehearsal room, people aren't going to be doing their best work. When people are full of sadness and fear and, it's like save the drama for the stage, not for our lives.
Right. Yeah, it's true. It's so true. Yeah, well said. That's well said. It makes sense though, and I realize this. I mean, I'm, traversing the theater community, and as I do, it just gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Everyone knows everyone, or knows someone who knows someone who knows everyone.
Yeah.
It's just funny. It's kind of funny.
Right.
Okay. So how many projects do you have in the works right now with writing in terms of writing?
Well, I have the first draft of my next YA project.
Great.
Which I need to read and obviously start going through a lot of revisions. But I also have a former play that just got published by Blue Moon Plays, and it would make a great YA novel. And so I'm thinking about that would be my second project of turning that into a YA novel. Yeah. And interestingly enough, a lot of what I'm interested in is sort of YA material. And it's not like, I'm not talking children's theater or children's stories, but I'm talking about protagonists who are in high school. I'm talking about stories that don't have a lot of gratuitous violence and sex and all that crazy language and cursing and all this stuff. So I kind of leave a lot of that stuff out because they've got years and years and years to have that in their life if they want that in their life. Yeah. So I tend to sort of focus more on character-driven stories that, aren't just violent or sexy for that purpose, and therefore that makes it great for YA. Yeah. Because usually YA, I don't know what the rules are for YA. I mean, your protagonist certainly is in high school at some point, right?
Yeah, there's no rules.
Yeah.
I said there was so much judgment. There's no rules.
So, and there's probably, I don't know. I just take stuff out that I, as a parent, wouldn't want my kid to read. So that's why I take out most cursing and most sex and most violence and just deal with the characters in the story and let it deal with that. And therefore it's YA. But as I said earlier, everybody who's been reading other people's money, none of them have been kids so far. They've all been peers and friends and adults. And, I'm getting, great word of mouth from that. So who knows? I mean, who knows?
Yeah. What advice would you give to a smart driven college student who maybe didn't study writing but should? So this is actually 500 more questions in one question, but the essence of this question is to get your views on young adults writing. Do you believe everyone should be writing, especially performers? Do you think
it's like studying the arts? It's like studying theater. It's all enriching. Yeah. So even if you don't go to it as a profession, for all those theater majors and all those people who got MFAs in something in theater, they're not all going into theater. There's no way. There's too many of them. There's not enough opportunities for that many people. Right. But that enrichment for those 3 years or 4 years or however many times, they're going to carry that for the rest of their life. And it's going to make them a better lawyer, and it's going to make them a better social worker,
communicator,
and a teacher. Yeah. There's so many skills, and also there's been so many scientific studies that say, kids who have the arts in their life, in their education, they do better in other subjects. Yes. So, it's important. If you're not going to be a writer, it's enriching to write, to journal, to write about your life. I mean, in a journal, you can bitch about everything that bemoans you, and you don't have to, ruin friendships over it. You can just write it in a book and close it.
Because it's not on Facebook.
Right. And then you can read about it years later and go, oh, look where I was in that year. That's interesting. Oh, I really felt like that, or I really had that much anger towards whomever. Yeah. So no, it's really enriching to write. And, I direct, I write, I'm a stage manager. Yeah. When I was a kid, I was acting. I mean, I think doing everything in theater informs everything. Yeah. I'm probably a better playwright because I've stage managed. I'm probably a better director because I've stage managed. I'm probably a better writer because I've directed. You know what I mean? Or I've acted. So the more you know and the more you experience, the more informed you're going to be on everything. So certain people say, okay, this is my track and this is what I'm going to do in my life. For me, I kind of want to do it all. And so whatever crosses my path comes my way. And as my grandmother said, you always say yes. So I feel like if something crosses my path, it crossed my path for a reason. And so I want to trust that it's in my life for good. And so I want to say yes to it and experience that chapter, but and that's why I've had so many different chapters in my life, be it, I was an entertainment supervisor for 3.5 years at Disney World down in Orlando. Yeah. And then, and I've taught and I've stage managed and I've directed at universities. And, it's just fun. I just say yes. Would I be further along in one of those categories if I just stuck to that category? Maybe. Yeah. But I also kind of like variety in my life, so it's good doing all of it.
Yeah. No, and I really like that. That's a good view. That's a good point of view to have on life, is to say, to say yes to things that enter if they feel right. They're there for the right reason. I love that.
I think when things happen smoothly, as I said earlier, when you lose a track of time, it's meant to be, or it's a sign that you're doing something that's important to you. And I think too, when something comes into your life smoothly and then you say yes to it smoothly and you're moving on to it, I think that's also a sign that it's meant to be.
I love that. This has been a great conversation. I love it. I'm so grateful that you're taking the time to sit down with me and share this information. I know it's
my pleasure.
I have a personal interest in writing. And I think that I do believe that actors should, if you're in entertainment, you should be creating. If you're not seeing the roles you want to have, make them. And I think it's really great to just kind of hear your views on it and so much more. So I really appreciate that. I'm curious, if there was a word or a phrase that you could put on a billboard for millions of people to see, does anything come to mind?
Patience and perseverance.
Patience and perseverance.
That would definitely be a billboard of mine. Because, so often we compare our paths to our friends' paths.
All the time.
Yeah. And we have friends who,
are on Broadway.
Or
wherever, writing and published
winning
whatever.
Tony Awards right at this moment. And, or they have the big houses and they have vacation homes, or now they're doing films. And you're saying, well, you know what, I work just as hard as they did. And, we've gone through the same kind of this and that. But you can't compare yourself to other people's paths. You have to trust the process. You have to just keep doing the work. And you have to have patience and persevere. And that's what keeps me sane, because if I were to go to that place where I was constantly comparing myself to everybody else, it would drive you crazy.
It cripples you.
Yeah.
It can cripple you.
Right. So you just have to know you have your own pace, you have your own path, and you just have to trust the process, trust the big picture that it's happening by having patience and persevering. But it's always about persevering. It's never about sitting still and just sitting in your muck and complaining. You have to move forward and do the work.
Yeah, that's the funny thing. The difference between the person who wins the Tony Award and doesn't is perseverance. I mean, Andre DeShields, he went at it for many years, and he's finally got one. So it's 73. He gets it. And that's just like, well, that's the difference between him and another 73-year-old being like, I never got one. Or at any age, you know what I mean? And I'm just using that because the Tony Awards just happened at the time of this recording. By the time this episode comes out, it'll be a month or two later. But it's that idea of perseverance. I love that. Patience and perseverance.
My dad always told me to save all my rejection letters so that if I was ever accused of being an overnight success, I could just say, look at these.
Look at all, I got a stack of them, baby. All the no's.
Yeah. And now it's harder because now so often the rejection letters are on email and I don't tend to print those out. So I can't make my stack really big, but you could have a folder for them. There's a new folder.
You just write rejections.
Rejections. Yeah.
It's a folder.
And it keeps you alive. It keeps you alive.
It really does. It really does. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up here that I didn't touch on, or anything else you want to touch on?
The other billboard I would say that I often tell students is careful how much you charge. It's easier to live without a debt. When you don't have debt in your life, life is easier. And so you don't need the collections when you don't try to keep that monthly nut as small as possible so that you can stay in the game and play longer. Whereas a lot of people have to drop out of the business or drop out of chasing their dream because they have responsibilities and they have to pay rent, or they have kids and they have to have a certain amount of income, or they've given themselves deadlines. And if you have a small nut, you don't have to worry so much financially. Whereas if you're charging everything and constantly eating out and you've got all these monthly bills, that's gonna hurt your career.
It'll shut you down.
Yeah, it can.
Yeah, that's good. That's good financial advice, too. Yeah, if you lower the standard of living, you can. You can go further on less.
I never charge anything unless I know I can pay it off at the end of the month.
Yeah,
but I don't. And you know, oh my God, to charge something and then pay it off for several months, that means it's also really, really expensive too. You're making it more expensive.
Oh, so, yeah. Well, yeah, it's always more expensive. Right. The interest. Wow. This is great.
Thank you.
Thank you. This has been a lot of fun. Where can we find you on the web, social media, etc.?
Well, certainly I have an author page on Amazon. So if you Gregory Fletcher on Amazon, but I also have a website, gregoryfletcher.com. And I'm on the website at the Dramatists Guild and the National Play.
And all the links are going to be in the bio. So everyone will be able to just click right below this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
This has been a lot of fun. Thanks, Gregory.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Gregory Fletcher.
You've been listening to Entertainment X, the podcast. You can follow Entertainment X on Instagram at _EntertainmentX_. If you haven't yet, go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join Clay next week for another curiosity conversation on Entertainment X. Thank you for listening.